a text box that says enter temperature in Fahrenheit, text box for it. We'll have a button that says convert, and then we'll have a label that says how much it is in centigrade. So pretty simple, straightforward. Enhancements that we could introduce to this. One enhancement that we could introduce to this is we could make it so that you don't need a button. So as soon as you type in the temperature, it goes and does the calculations. Another option that we could use, or another feature that we could add, is we could add a slider. I always forget the precise term for it, a progress bar or a seek bar, that we could go back and forth and use that to set the temperature, similar to what they did in the tip example. The other thing we could do is we could add a spinner control that would allow us to do either conversion, either Fahrenheit to centigrade or centigrade to Fahrenheit. So we'll get the basic one done first. It just does Fahrenheit to centigrade. Then we'll expand on it to do some of these other things as time allows. And if we need to pick up some of this on Thursday, we can. All right. Now, in thinking through what we need for this, all right, what are the things that we're going to need? Well, we're going to need an icon. That's easy enough. Actually, that's not true that we're going to need an icon. We're going to need 3 icons, all right? One for the high density, one for the medium density, and one for the low density. So icon files, that's no problem. We can copy that from one of the other examples. We're going to need a layout XML, all right? We're going to need a manifest. So manifest, layout XML. We're going to need a strings file that we're going to put our hard-coded strings in. And we're then going to need a Java class for the activity. So to summarize, the manifest pretty much gets generated on its own. So we need that, but that will get generated on its own. We're going to need a XML file for the layout. We're going to need a strings file to contain our hard-coded strings for our labels. Things such as F to C, enter temperature in Fahrenheit, convert, that sort of thing. And then lastly, we're going to need a Java class to do this. Now, we could potentially do it in several different orders. All right. What I aim to do is I aim to create the user interface first, and then we'll put the brains behind it, the actual calculation of it. So I'll work on developing that first. And in doing that, I'll develop the XML file for the layout and the strings file in tandem. So as I'm creating labels, or as I'm creating stuff on my, as I'm creating stuff in my layout XML file, I'll be adding the appropriate string file. All right, and then we'll go in and we'll create the activity to go and do the stuff that it needs to. So, I'm going to go here. I'm going to say File, New, and I'm going to pick Android Application Project. When we do that, we get a list of questions, essentially, to ask. Application name, we'll call this conversion. Maybe. Package name. For the package name, we want to put a package name in that's going to uniquely qualify our classes to make sure that we don't interfere with any other classes that potentially could have something, another meaning. All right. So typically that's done by using sort of the reverse domain system. In other words, we're here at LCCC, right? So, and we're working on CISS265, all right? So I'm going to go in edu.lorraineccc dot, what did I say, CISS265 dot Zellers. All right. It matters that it's something that's unique. All right. The fact that I'm using a URL defines, a URL and domain names define uniqueness, right? There is no two LorraineCCC.edus in the world. All right. So that's why I picked that to qualify that. And then I tacked something on to make it uniquer still. All right, which I know is horrible grammar, but give me a pass on that. All right. So for example, if I had classes in the advanced Android class, I could avoid any potential ambiguity between them. All right. So I'll click Next. And it's going to do a few things for me. It is going to create the project in my workspace. It is going to create a custom launch icon. So it's going to do some of those things for me already, which is good. I like when it does things for me. I want to understand what it does, but I don't have a problem with it creating an icon for me. All right. We get to pick the icon. All right, we'll pick that. That looks good. Create activity. We'll create a blank activity. And we'll call it main activity. And we'll finish. So now what we have in my conversion is we have some of the files that we're going to need. All right. I have, if I look, I have my Android manifest that has the parameters that I entered in. Right? Looks a lot like all the other ones that we've seen, right? Because we're not really doing anything fancy here. So there's no need for us to encode any kind of permissions or anything. All right? But it describes the package name and it says what the icon is and so on. We have a icon for medium, high. Actually, we just have high and medium. We don't have a low density one. That's interesting that they didn't do that. All right. It also created some folders with some resource qualifiers if we want to go in and do that. I'm going to actually get rid of the folders that I'm not going to be using. So I'll go and delete this guy. Delete this guy. This guy. And delete this guy. So I think we're ready at this point to look at our values. We have dimensions, strings, and styles. We haven't talked about dimensions and styles yet, so I'm going to get rid of those guys. But we have our strings file that has a couple of simple declarations. All right, our app name, action settings, and hello world. Only one of these I'm going to keep is the app name. All right, we'll add some of our own. All right, and then we have the layout, which, if we look at this, this is using a relative layout. And it sets some parameters here that we can get rid of. All right. Now, we've looked at, if I'm not mistaken, 3 layouts in class. We've looked at a linear layout, which is where things simply line up one after the other. You got your first thing, you got your second thing, your third thing, and fourth thing. And you can either orient it horizontally or you can orient it vertically. So that's a linear layout. Second thing we looked at was a relative layout, which this guy was by default, but we can certainly go in and change it. All right. A relative layout is where you specify where things are compared to other things. So you put something on the screen, then you say, I want this to the right of it, this to the left of it, this underneath it, and so on. So you put a control up there, and based on, you position a control based on where other controls are. All right? The third kind of layout that we looked at in the tip calculator one, not the simple tip calculator, but Diedel's tip calculator, was a table layout. And a table layout is just like any other table, rows and columns, where you have rows of items and columns of items, sort of a grid or a matrix. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to pick what I would call is the simplest of layouts, and that is the linear layout. Because with the linear layout, you don't really specify anything. You just have a list of controls that is scrolled through. So I'm going to go, I'm going to copy the linear layout tag from this guy and put it in my layout here. And of course, since this is XML and we're dealing with tags and each tag needs an ending tag, I need to put in then the linear layout ending tag at the bottom. So this is almost like an HTML page, all right? Whereas we're describing the contents or the appearance of the page using a series of tags. Now these are different tags than HTML tags, to be sure, but we're using text views where you might have a paragraph tag, for example, and so on down the line. All right, so I specify that this is going to be oriented vertically and a linear layout, which means I don't really have to position the items. The order I put them in are just going to be stacked that way vertically. All right, it's probably the most straightforward kind of layout I can have. I got that from the example that we went over in class, the main activity. I'm also going to copy over a text view. And the value of the text is going to be the string that's found in hello. Well, if we look in here, we don't have a string for hello, so I'll go and create it. This is what I would expect I would do in tandem. The first activity, I'd create the layout, and I would create the strings as well. So the hello is, going back to my little design, I want to say Fahrenheit to centigrade conversion. So I'll go and change that. Now, you have to believe that this is true. When I program on my own, not just when I'm demonstrating in front of a class, but when I program on my own, I'm going to do a tiny little piece and then I'm going to test it. Okay? So, depending on how comfortable I am with the language, that little piece might be a tiny piece or it might be just a little piece. But I'm not going to write a big old giant program with 50 different things, all right, and then go and test it for the first time. Because if it doesn't work, what's wrong? Who knows what's wrong, right? So I'm going to go and I'm going to test this. Well, how can I test this? And what is testing going to consist of at this point? Testing at this point is simply going to consist of the activity firing up this screen and simply having a label that says Fahrenheit to centigrade conversion. So let's go and make sure that our activity is ready for that. So I'll go in here in my source. I'm going to get rid of that. All right. So far in all the examples we looked at, the only thing that we've had is the onCreate method. And our onCreate methods all start roughly the same. All right? Actually, I think the first two lines have always been the same. First thing we do is we call the superclasses onCreate method, and then we set the content view. Now, what does set content view mean? It means bring this XML file to life. All right? Go and actually create a screen that has all these different views on it, all these different controls. And use that as the screen, as the view for this activity. So now, even though I haven't written any code yet, I have enough code to at least test to make sure that my strings are tied to my layout file, and that's tied to the activity file. So let's go and test this and make sure that it works. My project contains errors. Oh, I have a menu that it generated that I'm going to get rid of. We're not doing anything with the menu folder, so yeah, we can get rid of it. And get rid of this app theme too. Oh. What's it telling me? It's telling me I'm violating the rules of XML. There should be a thing there, a greater than sign. Let's try again. Oh. Cut that out of the manifest. I screwed something up with. me the manifest is missing. The manifest is right down here. Tell you what. Take 2. Let's try this again. New Android application project. We'll call it conversion 2. edu.lorraine.ccc.CISS265. Create an activity, create that, yeah. That. Create activity. Layout name, finish. Okay. So this created that. We'll go in and replace our layout like I did. I'm grabbing the linear layout from here. All right. I'm going to go in and what else do I need to do? Oh, set the string hello. We want it to say Fahrenheit to centigrade. And string hello. I didn't call that string the right name. Should just be hello, not hello world. Finally, we can run this on a device. I really don't know what happened. I was deleting things, and I probably deleted something that I shouldn't have. All right. And sure enough, here we go. We have at least this part working. A little hard to see, but there we have our conversion with Fahrenheit to centigrade. We can, as they say in the NFL, review the tape if we want to see exactly what I did wrong. I think what happened is, notice that there is an Android manifest file here. All right. And there's an Android manifest file here in the bin. Whoops. I believe what happened is I went and modified the one in the bin. And you shouldn't modify the one in the bin. If I'm going to get rid of anything from anywhere, it should be from this guy down here. All right. And then when it gets compiled, it recreates that manifest in the bin. The bin file, the bin folder, is the binaries. It's the actual code that gets generated that gets installed in the machine. So that gets generated by the compiler process. All right. I went in and changed the manifest there, which was wrong. I monkeyed around with the code that was generated instead of changing the code, instead of changing my code, which is the manifest down here. So I believe that's what I did wrong. I wasn't careful enough in looking at that, and I looked at the manifest in the bin as opposed to changing this manifest. So don't touch the code that's in the bin, because that gets generated, that gets compiled. So the changes you make should happen in the manifest. Okay, so we're back in business. Even on this machine, which is fairly fast, it takes forever for the emulator to fire off. That's why I use devices. If any of you need devices either to work on in lab, or even if you need to borrow one to take home to work on something, let me know, and we can make arrangements for that. All right, sorry for that confusion. Let's move on to the next part. So the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and create the rest of the GUI. So I'm going to go in and put a edit text field which, just for the simplicity of typing, I'm copying from that other example. I'm going to put an edit text field here. All right. Giving it an input type of number, which is what it is, a number. All right. I'm going to put a button on the page. Call the ID of this convert, and the text will come from a string called convert. All right, so I'll go into my strings file and create a string called convert. And then finally, I'm going to create a text view for the results, for the centigrade value. So I'll create that text view, and I'll put it right in here. And I'll give it an ID of centigrade. All right. So we should have our GUI going. All right. We should have the elements of our GUI. Let's go and run this to test it. Now, again, it was a bonehead move for me to edit the wrong manifest, but that did teach a good lesson, right? If things were going bad that quickly, something got messed up. All right. If I would have waited until I entered in all this code and then tested at that point and got that error, I'd have been baffled about what I did wrong and would have never been able to figure it out. And I would have invested too much time just to say, you know what, I'm going to chuck this one. I messed something up in deleting those things or editing them or whatever, and go in and create something that was new. All right? So that's why you test a little bit at a time. Again, lesson learned there. I'm going to go and test this now, and I should have my completed GUI. Or not. That's correct. It's a different control. Okay. This might be best as a visual. I'm not really sure exactly what you mean. We can take a look at it. The error I had, by the way, is I neglected the edit text end tag. I had just the start tag and the request focus tag. I need the edit text tag to complete this. All right, let's try again to run this guy. And we'll run it on the Samsung. And we get our GUI. Conversion, we have our text box, we have our button. The text box I can only enter numbers in because I've defined it as a numeric. And I do have a button that I can press, and it looks like it was being pressed, but nothing's happening because I haven't connected any code to it. All right? Is everyone clear on where we're at so far and what I've done so far and how I've gotten to where I am now? Or are there any questions on this? Okay. Well, hopefully you can take and try to recreate this and try to recreate it doing the conversion example or not the conversion example, the currency conversion example that's lab 2. All right, now we want to do something with the button and actually do something with the button. All right, so what do we need? Where do we associate code with our button? Is that in my layout.xml? Is that in my activity code? Or is that somewhere else? It's going to be, right. It's either going to be in main activity or it's going to be in another class. And in this case, I'm going to do it in another class, but I'm going to make it an internal class. So it will be in main activity. Now what we need to do in a nutshell, all right, is wire our GUI and our activity code together. So how do we do that? Let's look at our example here to see how we did that before. And how we did it is we had a whole bunch of statements that look like this that that grab the pointer to our things that were on the GUI. Now, notice something's wrong right off the bat, right? We have a little error here. Why do we have that error? This is one that is going to oh, I inadvertently chopped some code off here. Today is not my day. All right. So we're now pointing to the button that's called Convert. All right. How do we know that? Well, we've identified that button as having an ID of Convert. So we are pointing to that button. Now, we have to associate a listener with that button. So, we can associate the listener a couple different ways for this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class on that convert button, convert dot set on click listener to convert click listener. Now, what is that convert click listener? It's giving me a compile error. I have to create that object. And I'll create that object just like I did it in this example by down below, I'll create private convert all right. Now, it doesn't know what a click listener is. All right. Does that mean I got the name wrong for click listener? No. I haven't imported that class definition into my code. And so what I can do is actually, I did get it wrong. It's on click listener. Now, doesn't know what an on-click listener is, but I can import it. And that'll take care of the issue of not knowing what an on-click listener is. So when you reference a class, if it doesn't recognize that class, one of the solutions is to import it. All right? And if you put your mouse on whatever the error is giving you, it will give you a list of potential solutions. And if you don't see import class, then you know you got the name wrong. Like, for example, when I initially did click listener, I didn't see the possible correction as being import the class on click listener. So therefore, I know that I did something wrong. All right? All right. Now, what do we need to do to finish out this on-click listener event? We need to override let me finish my thought here, and then we'll go back and look at that. Yeah. Right? All right. And now I can do my thing with that code. Now your question, did I call the button button? No. The button in my XML file is of type view button, is a view of button. All right. Its ID is ID convert, and the text it's getting is from the string convert. So here, when I want to refer to that button in my activity, button convert equals button, I'm casting my result as a button, find view by ID, RID convert. So what does this do? It finds a thing on the page, on the GUI, that has an ID of convert. And since we know it's a button, we have to tell it to treat it like a button. Because Java only knows that it found a view. It doesn't know what kind of view it is. So we have to tell it what kind of view it is. Now we know it's a button, so we tell it to treat it as a button. Then I'm going to store the pointer to that button to convert. So no, I'm not calling my button button. Button in this case is the name of the class that view belongs. This is a button class named, and I'm calling my pointer convert to simply keep it easy for me because the ID of this control is also convert. So now I need to go through and actually do the processing. All right. So on my onClick, I'm going to say super dot onClick. And then I'm going to go in and grab a pointer to my text box, my edit text rather, edit text, which is called amount, AMT, has an ID of amount. So I will say AMT equals, up here, AMT equals edit text find view by ID r.id.amt. All right. Now, notice I still have a couple errors going here. All right. The errors are, again, if I hover over that, this is what I was talking about before. One of the fixes is to import the class edit text. And that's typically, if I have that named right, that's probably the option I want to take. If you remember on the earlier one, with the click listener, I called it erroneously click listener instead of on click listener. If you look, I didn't have that option to import type click listener because Android doesn't know what a click listener is. It knows what an on click listener is. So I can go and I can import this guy, and that'll take care of that problem. Likewise, I can, for view, I can import view. And that'll take care of this. This is the argument that gets passed to the onClick event. It's the view that got clicked on, in a nutshell. So these events in Android, when they fire off, they get passed arguments. If you remember, for example, last time on the text changed event, we got passed the value of the text that was changed. so that we could do something with it. Well, same idea here. All right. Oh, I capitalized that wrong. That's why it's giving me grief there. All right. But yeah, I guess past this argument, and we can do something with that argument if we need to. All right. So, what we have now is we have our code that's going to fire off when the button gets clicked. So I'm going to create a double for Fahrenheit, a double for centigrade, I'm going to set the value for F. I'm going to grab from that text box that's called amount. Okay. F equals double parse double amount get text to string. What am I doing there? I'm taking the value that is in that edit text that I'm pointing to with this variable amount. I'm converting it to string, and then I am converting it into double. I need to do that because a text box, regardless of the validation that I put on it, could contain any text. So I have to make sure that I have a number here. Centigrade equals, let's see if I remember this right, Fahrenheit minus 32 times 5 divided by 9. I think that's right. And, pardon me? Okay, we'll see if this works. All right. So now I want to take and I want to put in the result label. What type is the result label? It is a text view. And what's it called? It has an ID of centigrade. So, text view centigrade. Doesn't know about text views. Guess what I need to do? Import it. Centigrade equals, need to cast as a text view. Find view by ID. r.id.centigrade. Right? So now I can go and I can set the text for that text view. Should be a set text method somewhere there. like that. All right. We'll talk about what I did in a second here. I made it a capital D. And let's go and run this. And let's try see if that works. All right, bringing it up on this. We now have this here. All right, let's try converting 32 degrees. That is 0 degrees centigrade. 212 degrees is 100 degrees centigrade. So we did get it to work. All right, finally. I do apologize for the confusion of the beginning. It might be, I'll attempt to put in a start time to say, skip the first X minutes of this and jump to that. Let's review what I did. All right, I created the application. I went in and I created the XML layout file. All right. I created the strings file that contains the hard-coded strings. Then I made sure that my XML file was associated with the activity so that when I start the activity, I see my screen. So I got that. That's where I went south the first time because I did something. Probably I edited the wrong manifest file, screwed up everything, and I couldn't get it to run. Which is, again, a blessing I found it at that point and not like later on down the line. All right? So when I recreated it then, I didn't have that problem, and sure enough, the GUI appeared. I then went and finished out the GUI by adding all the different controls. Made sure that that worked and that I could view it on the device. Lastly, I went in and I wired my code to the GUI. That consists of, again, getting pointers to the different views on the page or on the screen, which we do this way. It also consisted of setting an on-click listener for the button. All right. As I was doing this, as I was referencing the new classes that I had not referenced before, it would sometimes look like it was giving me an error where the problem was actually I simply needed to import that class definition. All right. Now, I did a little trick here that I want to talk about. Notice that is D, double with a lowercase d. This is double with an uppercase d. Java's case sensitive, so those are two different things. What's the difference between double with a lowercase d and double with a capital D? Double with a capital D is an object. Double with a lowercase d is a primitive. All right. In Java, there's two kinds of variables. There's object references, and there are primitives. With primitives, you simply store the value of something. It's not an object that has methods and properties and all that sort of thing. That's why when it was a double with a lowercase d and it was a primitive, if I said D or if I said C toString, I got an error. And if I hover over the error, it says I can't invoke the toString method on the primitive type double. In other words, doubles is a primitive. It's just a value. It doesn't have any methods associated with it. For every primitive, int, double, and so on, there's sort of an object version of it. Because sometimes it's real handy to treat numbers and primitives like they were an object. For example, if you're using an array list, that's in my Java class, that's a classic example. Array lists need objects, so I will use the object version of a primitive if I want to put a primitive in a array list. The other thing that's nice is, given the fact that this is an object, it has the toString method associated with it. So I didn't have to go through any gyrations. I simply changed that to a definition of a double, and then I could call the toString method. All right, because remember, the text box, the attribute of a text box, the text attribute of a text box is a string. Therefore, I couldn't simply say set text to C, right? Because C is a number, it's not a string. So I have to convert that to a double. Java is very precise about the data types. All right, you can't like set a string to a number. It blows up if you do that. You can use double with a lowercase d and double with an uppercase d more or less interchangeably. Notice I said more or less. All right, which means that I can use a double with a lowercase d in a calculation and put the result in a double with a capital D. That is actually known in Java as boxing and unboxing, where we take a primitive and convert it to its object version, or take a object version and convert it to its primitive version. All right, so it comes in handy. So I don't think we talked about that previously, but it really came into place here because I wanted to use the toString function, and I can't do that on a double. So I changed it to a double with a capital D. So now it's an object reference, and every object has a toString method. So I can call the toString method on that, which simply takes and spits out a string version of the number that's stored in the double. All right, this didn't go as smoothly as I hoped, but I do hope that this did give some insight on how to create an application from start and the process of going through that. All right, so I hope that is helpful. All right, we'll see you up in lab.